Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 982nd night, she resumed, It hath reached to me, O auspicious king, that Abdullah said, Do ye twain await me whilst I wend thither and return to you? So I left them and walked on till I came to the gate of the place, and saw it a city of building wondrous and projection marvellous, with boulevards high towering, and towers strong builded, and palaces high soaring. Its portals were of Chinese iron, rarely gilded and graven, at such wise as confounded the wit. I entered the gateway, and saw there a stone bench, whereon sat a man, bearing on his forearm a chain of brass, whereto hung 14 keys. So I knew him to be the porter of the city, and that it had 14 gates. I drew near him, and said to him, Peace be with thee. But he returned not to me a salam, and I saluted him a second and a third time, but he made me no reply. Then I laid my hand on his shoulder, and said to him, Ho! Why dost thou not return my salam? Art thou asleep, or deaf, or other than a Moslem, that thou refrainest from exchanging the salutation? But he answered me not, neither stirred. So I considered him, and saw that he was stone. Quoth I, Verily, an admirable matter. This is a stone wroughten in the semblance of a son of Adam, and wanting in naught save speech. Then I left him, and entering the city, beheld a man standing on the road. So I went up to him, and scrutinized him, and found him stone. Presently, as I walked abroad and the broadways, and saw that this was everywhere the case, I met an old woman bearing on her head a bundle of clothes ready for washing. So I went up to her, and examining her, saw that she was stone, and the bundle of clothes on her head was stone also. Then I fared for the market, where I saw an oilman with his scales set up and fronted by various kinds of wares, such as cheese and so forth, all of stone. Moreover, I saw all manner of tradesmen seated in their shops, and men and women and children, some standing, some sitting, but they were all stone, and the stuffs were like spiders' webs. I amused myself with looking upon them, and as often as I laid hold of a piece of stuff, it powdered in my hands like dust to spread. Presently I saw some chests, and opening one of them, found it full of gold in bags. So I laid hold upon the bags, but they crumbled away in my grasp, whilst the gold abode unchanged. I carried off of it what I could carry, and said to myself, Were my brothers with me, they might take of this gold their fill, and possess themselves of these hoards which have no owner. Then I entered another shop, and found therein more than this, but could bear away no more than I had borne. I left this market, and went on to another, and thence to another, and another, much enjoying the sight of all manner of creatures of various kinds, all several stones, even to the dogs and the cats, till I came to the goldsmith's bazaar, where I saw men sitting in their shops, with their stock and trade about them, some of their hands, and others in crates of wicker work. When I saw this, Commander of the Faithful, I threw down the gold, and loaded myself with goldsmith's ware as much as I could carry. Then I went on to the jewel market, and saw the jewelers seated in their shops, each with a tray before him full of all sorts of precious stones, jacinths and diamonds and emeralds and balanced rubies and so forth. But all the shopkeepers were stone. Whereupon I threw away the goldsmith's ware, and carried off as many jewels as I could carry, regretting that my brothers were not with me, so that they might take what they would of these costly gems. Then I left the jewel market, and went on till I came to a great door, quaintly gilded and decorated with about the fairest fashions, within which were wooden benches, and in the porch sat eunuchs and bodyguards, horsemen and footmen, and officers of police, each and every robed in the richest of raiment, but they were all stone. I touched one of them, and his clothes crumbled away from his body like cobwebs. Then I passed through the door, and saw a palace without equal for its building, and the goodliness of the work that were therein. Here I found an audience chamber full of grandees and wazirs and officers and emirs, seated upon chairs, and every single one of them stone. Moreover, I saw a throne of red gold, crusted with pearls and gems, and seated thereon a son of Adam, arrayed in the most sumptuous raiment, and bearing on his head a Khosroan crown, diademed with the finest stones that shed like the light of the day. But when I came up to him, I found him made of stone. Then I went on to the gate of the harem, and entering found myself in the queen's presence chamber, wherein I saw a throne of red gold, inlaid with pearls and gems, and the queen seated thereon. On her head she wore a crown diademed with the finest jewels, and round about her were women like moons, seated upon chairs, and clad in the most sumptuous clothing of all colors. They also had the eunuchry, and with their hands upon their breasts were standing in the attitude of service. And indeed this hall confounded the beholder's wits with what was therein of quaint gilding, and rare painting, and curious carvings, and fine furniture. There hung the most brilliant lustres of limpid crystals, and in every globe of the crystal was a unique jewel, whose price money might not fulfill. So I threw down that which was with me, O Prince of the True Believers, and fell to taking of these jewels what I could carry, bewildered as to what I should bear away, and what I should leave. For indeed I saw this place as it were a treasure of the treasures of the cities. Presently I espied a wicket standing open, and within it a staircase. So I entered, and mounting 40 steps, heard a human voice reciting the Koran in low tone. I walked towards that sound, till I came to the main door, hung with a silken curtain, laced with wires of gold, whereon were strung pearls, and coral, and rubies, and cut emeralds, which gave forth a light like the light of the stars. The voice came from behind the curtain, so I raised it, and discovered a gilded door, whose beauty amazed the mind. I passed through the door, and found myself in a saloon, as it were a hoard upon earth's surface, and therein a girl, as she were the sun, shining full of sheen in the zenith of a sky serene. She was robed in the costliest of raiment, and decked with ornaments, the most precious that could be, and withal she was of passing beauty, and loveless, a model of symmetry, and seemliness of elegance, and perfect grace, with waist slender, and hips heavy, and dewy lips such as healed the sick, and eyelids lovely in their languor, as it were she of whom the sayer spake when he said, My best salam to what that robe in robes of symmetry, and what the blooming garth of cheek in guards of rosy blee. It seems as though the Pleiades depend upon her brow, and other lights of night in knots upon her breast we see. Did she but don a garment weft of rose's softest leaf, the leaf of rose would draw her blood when plucked that fruit from tree. And did she crash in ocean's face, next morn would see it a change to sweeter than the honeycomb of what was briny sea. And did she deign her favours, grant to a grey-bearded staff improped, he'd wake and rend the lion's limbs for mighty and valiancy. Then Abdullah continued, O Prince of True Believers, as soon as I saw that girl, I fell passionately in love with her, and going straight up to her, found her seated on a high couch, reciting by heart and in grateful memory the Book of Allah, to whom belong honor and glory. Her voice was like the harmony of the gates of heaven, when Rizwan openeth them, and the words came from her lips like a shower of gems, whilst her face was with beauty dight, bright and blossom white, even as saith the poet of similar sight. O thou, who gladdenest man by speech and rarest quality, grow longing and repine for thee, and grow beyond degree. In thee 2 things consume and melt the votaries of love, the dulcet song of David joined with Joseph's brilliancy. When I heard her voice of melody reciting the sublime Koran, my heart quoted from her killing glances, Peace, a word from a compassionating Lord. But I stammered in my speech, and could not say the salam salutation aright, for my mind and sight were confounded, and I became as saith the bard. Love-longing urged me not, except to trip in speech or free, nor save to shed my blood I passed the campment's boundary. I ne'er will hear a word from those who love to rail, but I will testify to love of him with every word of me. Then I hardened myself against the horrors of repine, and said to her, Peace be with thee, O noble lady, and treasured jewel. Allah grant endurance to the foundation of thy fortune fair, and uprise the pillars of thy glory rare. She said, And on thee from me be peace and salutation and high honor, O Abdullah, O son of Fazil. Welcome, and welcome, and fair welcome to thee, O dearling mine, and cooleth of mine eye. Rejoined I, O my lady, whence wottest thou my name, and who art thou, and what case befell the people of this city, that they are all become stone? I would have thee tell me the truth of the matter, for indeed I am admiring at this city and its citizens, and that I have found none alive therein save thyself. So Allah upon thee, tell me the cause of all this according to the truth. Quoth she, Sit, O Abdullah, and Inshallah, I will talk with thee, and acquaint thee in full with the facts of my case and of this place and its people. And there is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. So I sat me down by her side, and she said to me, Know, Abdullah, may Allah have mercy on thee, that I am the daughter of the king of this city, and that it is my sire with whom thou sawest seated on the high stead in the divan, and those who are round about him were the lords of his land, and the guards of his empery. He was a king of exceeding prowess, and had under his hand 1,060,000 troopers. The number of the emirs of his empire was 24,000, all of them governors and dignitaries. He was obeyed by 1,000 cities, besides towns, hamlets, and villages, and sconces and citadels, and the emirs of the wild Arabs under his hand were 1,000 in number, each commanding 20,000 horse. Moreover, he had moneys and treasures, and precious stones and jewels and things of price, such as eye never saw, nor of which ear ever heard. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 983rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the princess's daughter to the king of the stone city thus continued. Verily, O Abdullah, my father had moneys and hoards such as eye never saw, or of which ear never heard. He used to debel kings and do death champions and braves in battle, and in the field of fight, so that conquerors feared him, and the Khosrows humbled themselves to him. For all this, he was a miscreant in creed, ascribing to Allah's partnership, and adoring idols instead of the Lord of worship. And all of his troops were of images feigned in lieu of the all-knowing sovereign. One day of the days, as he sat on the throne of his kingship, compassed about with his grandees in his realm, suddenly there came into him a personage whose face illumined the whole divan with its light. My father looked at him and saw him clad in garb of green, tall of stature, and with hands that reached beneath his knees. He was of reverend aspect and awesome, and the light shone from his face. Said he to my sire, O rebel, O idolater, how long wilt thou take pride in worshipping idols, and abandoning the service of the all-knowing king? Say, I testify that there is no God but the God, and that Mohammed is his servant and his messenger. And embrace al-Islam, thou and thy tribe, and put away from you worship of idols, for they never suffice men's needs nor intercede. None is worshipful save Allah alone, who raised up the heavens without columns, and spread out the earth like carpets in mercy to his creatures. Quoth my father, Who art thou, O man, who rejectest the worship of idols, that thou sayest thus? Fearest thou not that the idols will be wroth with thee? He replied, The idols are stone. Their anger cannot prejudice me, nor their favor profit me. So do thou set in my presence thine idol, which thou adorest, and bid all thy folk bring each of his image. And when they are all present, do ye pray them to be wroth with me, and I will pray my Lord to be wroth with them. And ye shall descry the difference between the anger of the creature and that of the Creator. For your idols, ye fashioned them yourself, and the Satans clad themselves therewith as with clothing. And they it is who spake to you from within the bellies of the images. For your idols are made, and the Maker is my God, to whom naught is impossible. And the true appear to you, do ye follow it? And if the false appear to you, do you leave it? Cried they, Give us proof of thy God, that we may see it. And quoth he, Give me proof of your gods. So the king bade every one who worshipped his Lord in image form to bring it. And all the armies brought their idols to the divan. Thus fared it with them. But as for me, I was sitting behind the curtain, whence I could look upon my father's divan, and I had an idol of emerald, whose bigness was as the bigness of a son of Adam. My father demanded it, so I sent it to the divan, where they set it down beside that of my sire, which of the jacinth, while the wazir's idol was of diamond. As for those of the grandees and notables, some were of balas ruby, and some of carnelian, others of coral or cormoran aloes wood, and yet others of ebony or silver or gold. Each had his own idol, after the measure of his competence, whilst the idols of the common soldier and of the people were made of granite, some of wood, some of pottery, and some of mud. All were of various hues, yellow and red, green, black, white. Then said the personage to my sire, Pray your idols, and these idols to be wroth with me. So they aligned the idols in a divan, setting my father's idol on a chair of gold at the upper end, with mine by its side, and ranking the others each according to the condition of his owned it, and he worshipped it. Then my father arose, and prostrating himself to his own idol, said to it, O my God, thou art the bountiful Lord. Now is there among the idols a greater than it's thyself. Thou knowest that this person cometh to me, attacking thy divinity, and making mocking of thee. Yea, he voucheth that he hath a God stronger than you, and ordereth us leaving adoring thee, and adore his God. So be thou wrath with him, O my God. And he went on to supplicate the idol. But the idol returned him no reply, neither bespoke him with aught of speech. Whereupon quoth he, O my God, this is not of thy wont, for thou used to answer me when I addressed thee. How cometh it that I see thee silent and speaking not? Art thou unheeding or asleep? Awake, succor me and speak to me. And he shook it with his hands, but it spake not, neither it stirred from its stead. Thereupon quoth the personage, What aileth thine idol that it speaketh not? And quoth the king, Methinks he is absent-minded or asleep. Exclaimed the other, O enemy of Allah, how canst thou worship a God that speaketh not, nor availeth unto aught, and not worship my God, who to prayers deigns assent, and who is ever present, and never absent, neither unheeding nor sleeping, whom conjecture may not wean, who seeth and is not seen, and who over all things terrene is omnipotent. Thy God is powerless, and cannot guard itself from harm. And indeed, a stone Satan hath closed himself therewith, as with a coat, that he might debauch thee and delude thee. But now hath its devil departed. So do thou worship Allah, and testify that there is no God but he, and that none is worshipful, but no worship with but himself. Neither is there any good but his good. As for this thy God, it cannot ward off hurt from it. So how shall it ward off harm from thee? See with thine own eyes its impotence. So saying, he went up to the idol and dealt it a cuff on the neck, and it fell to the ground. Whereupon the king waxed wroth, and cried to the bystanders, This froward atheist hath smitten my God, slay him. So they would have arisen to smite him, but none of them could stir from his place. Then he propounded to them all Islam, but they refused to become Moslems, and he said, I will show you the wrath of my Lord. Quoth they, Let us see it. So he spread out his hands, and he said, O my God and my Lord, thou art my stay and my hope. Answer thou my prayer against these lewd folk who eat of thy good and worship other gods. O thou, the truth of thou of all might, O creator of day and night, I beseech thee to turn these people into stones, for thou art the puissant, nor is aught impossible to thee, and thou over all things art omnipotent. And Allah transformed the people of the city into stones. But as for me, when I saw the manifest proof of his deity, I submitted myself to him, and was saved from that which befell the rest. Then the personage drew near to me and said, Felicity was foreordained of Allah to thee, and in this a purpose had he. And he went on to instruct me, and took unto him the oath and covenant. I was then 7 years of age, and am now 30 years old. Then said I to him, O my Lord, all that is in the city and all the citizens are become stones by thine effectual prayer, and I am saved, for that I embraced al-Islam at thy hands. Wherefore art thou become my sheikh? So do thou tell me thy name, and succor me with thy security, and provide me with provisions whereon I may subsist. Quoth he, My name is Abu al-Abbas al-Qazi, and he planted me a pomegranate tree, which forthright grew up, and foliaged, flowered, and fruited, and bare one pomegranate. Whereupon quoth he, Eat of what wherewith the Allah the Almighty provideth thee, and worship him with a worship which is his due. Then he taught me the tenets of all Islam, and the canons of prayer, and the way of worship, together with the recital of the Koran. And I have now worshipped Allah in this place 23 years. Each day the tree yieldeth me a pomegranate which I eat, and it sustaineth me from tide to tide. And every Friday Al-Qazi, on whom be blessed, cometh to me, and 'tis he who acquainted me with thy name, and gave me the glad tidings of thy soon coming hither, saying to me, When he shall come to thee, entreat him with honour, and obey his bidding, and gainsay him not, but be thou to him wife, and he shall be to thee man, and wend with him whitherso he will. So when I saw thee, I knew thee, and such is the story of this city and of its people and the peace. Then she showed me the pomegranate tree, whereon was one granado, which she took, in eating one half thereof herself, gave me the other to eat. And never did I taste aught sweeter or more savory or satisfying than that pomegranate. After this I said to her, Art thou content, even as the Sheikh Al-Qazi charged thee, to be my wife, and take me to mate? And art thou ready to go with me to my own country, and abide with me in the city of Basra? She replied, Yes, Inshallah, and it please Almighty Allah. I hearken to thy word, and I obey thy hest, without gainsaying. Then I made a binding covenant with her, and she carried me into her father's treasury, whence we took what we could carry, and going forth that city, walked on till we came to my brothers, whom I found searching for me. They asked, Where hast thou been? Indeed, thou hast tarried long from us, and our hearts were troubled for thee. And the captain of the ship said to me, O merchant Abdullah, the wind hath been fair for us this great while, and thou hast hindered us from setting sail. And I answered, There is no harm in that. Oft time slow is sure, and my absence hath wrought us naught but advantage. For indeed, there hath betided me therein the attainment of our hopes, and God gifted is he who said, I weet not when as to a land I fare, in quest of good, what I shall there obtain, or gain I fare with sole desire to seek, or loss that seeketh me when seek I gain. And then I said to them, See what hath befallen to me in this mine absence, and displayed to them all that was with me of treasures, and told them what I had beheld in the city of stone, adding, Had ye hearkened to me and gone with me, ye had gotten of these things great gain. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 984th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Abdullah bin Fazil said to his shipmates and to his 2 brothers, Had ye gone with me, ye had gotten of these things great gain. But they said, By Allah, had we gone, we had not dared to go into the king of the city. Then I said to my brothers, No harm shall befall you, for that which I have will suffice us all, and this is our lot. So I divided my booty into 4 parts according to our number, and gave 1 to each of my brothers and to the captain, and taking the 4th for myself, setting aside somewhat for the servants and the sailors, who rejoiced and blessed me. And all were content with what I gave them, save my brothers, who changed countenance and rolled their eyes. I perceived that lust of lucre had gotten a hold of them, so I said to them, O my brothers, methinks that I have given you doth not satisfy you, but we are brothers, and there is no difference between us. My good and yours are one and the same, and if I die, none will inherit of me but you. And I went on to soothe them. Then I bore the princess on board the galleon and lodged her in the cabin, where I sent her somewhat to eat, and we sat talking. And I said to my brothers, Said they, O our brother, what wilt thou do with the damsel of surpassing beauty? And I replied, I mean to contract marriage with her as soon as I reach Basra, and make a splendid wedding, and go into her there. Exclaimed one of them, O my brother, verily this young lady excelleth in beauty and loveliness, and the love of her is fallen on my heart. Wherefore I desire that thou give her to me, and I will espouse her. And the other cried, I too desire this. Give her to me, that I may espouse her. O my brothers, answered I, indeed she took of me an oath and a covenant that I would marry her myself. So if I give her to one of you, I shall be false to my oath and to the covenant between me and her. Haply she will be broken-hearted, for she came not with me but on condition that I marry her. So how can I wed her to other than myself? As for you both loving her, I love her more than you twain, for she is a treasure trove. And as for my giving her to one of you, that is a thing which may not be. But if we reach Basra in safety, I will look for you out 2 girls of the best of the damsels of Basra, and demand them of you in marriage, and pay the dower of my own monies, and make one wedding, and we will all 3 go into our brides on the same night. But leave ye this damsel, for she is of my portion. They held their peace, and I thought they were content with that which I had said. Then we fared onwards to Basra, and every day I sent her meat and drink, but she came not forth out of the cabin, whilst I slept between my brothers on deck. We sailed for 40 days till we sighted Basra city, and rejoiced that we were coming near to it. Now I trusted in my brothers, and was at my ease with them, for none knoweth the hidden future save Allah the Most High. So I lay down to sleep that night, but as I abode drowned in slumber, I suddenly found myself caught up by these my brothers, one seizing me by the legs, and the other by the arms, for they had taken counsel together to drown me in the sea for the sake of the damsel. When I saw myself in their hands, I said to them, O my brothers, why do you this to me? And they replied, Ill-bred that thou art, wilt thou barter our affection for a girl? We will cast thee into the sea because of this. So saying, they threw me overboard. Here Abdullah turned to the dogs and said to them, Is this not all true, O my brothers, or not? And they bowed their heads and fell a-whining, as if confirming his speech, whereat the Caliph wondered. Then Abdullah resumed, O Commander of the Faithful, when they threw me into the sea, I sank to the bottom, but the water bore me up again to the surface, and before I could think, behold, a great bird, the bigness of a man, swooped down upon me, and snatching me up, flew me up into the upper air. I fainted, and when I opened my eyes, I found myself in a strong pillared place, in a high-builded palace, adorned with magnificent paintings and pennants of gems of all shapes and hues. Therein were damsels standing with their hands crossed over their breasts, and behold, in their midst was a lady, seated on a throne of red gold, set with pearls and gems, and clad in apparel whereon no mortal might open his eyes, for the lustre of the jewels wherewith they were decked. About her waist she wore a girdle of jewels, no money could pay their worth, and on her head a 3-fold tiara, dazing thought and wit and dazzling heart and sight. Then the bird which had carried me thither shook, and became a young lady, bright as sun raying light. I fixed my eyes on her, and behold, it was she whom I had seen in snake form on the mountain, and had rescued from the dragon which had wound his tail around her. Then said to her the lady who sat upon the throne, Why hast thou brought hither this mortal? And she replied, O my mother, this is he who was the means of veiling my honor among the maidens of the Jinn. Then quoth she to me, Knowest thou who I am? And quoth I, No. Said she, I am she who was on such a mountain, where the black dragon strave with me, and would have forced me honor, but thou slewest him. And I said, I saw but a white snake with the dragon. She rejoined, 'Tis I who was the white snake, but I am the daughter of the Red King, sovereign of the Jann, and my name is Sadai. She who sitteth there is my mother, and her name is Mubaraka, wife of the Red King. The black dragon who attacked me and would have done away my honor was Wazir to the Black King, Darfil by name, and he was foul of favor. It chanced that he saw me, and he fell in love with me. So he sought me in marriage of my sires, who sent to him and say, Who art thou, O scum of Wazirs, that thou shouldest wed with kings' daughters? Whereupon he was wroth, and sware an oath that he would assuredly do away my honor to spite my father. Then he fell to tracking my steps, and following me whithersoever I went, designing to ravish me. Wherefore thou fell between him and my parent mighty fierce wars, and bloody jars. But my sire could not prevail against him, for that he was fierce as fraudful, and as often as my father pressed hard upon him, and seemed like to conquer, he would escape from him, till my sire was at his wit's end. Every day I was forced to take new form and hue, for as often as I assumed a shape, he would assume its contrary, and to whatsoever land I fled to, he would snuff my fragrance, and follow me thither, so that I suffered sore affliction of him. At last I took the form of a snake, and betook myself to the mountain where thou sawest me, whereupon he changed himself to a dragon, and pursued me, till I fell into his hands, when he strove with me, and I struggled with him, till he wearied me, and mounted me, meaning to have his lustful will of me, but thou camest and smotest him with the stone, and slewest him. Then I returned to my own shape, and showed myself to thee, saying, I am indebted to thee for a service, such as is not lost save with the son of adultery. So when I saw thy brothers do with thee this treachery, and throw thee into the sea, I hastened to thee, and saved thee from destruction. And now honor is due to thee from my mother and my father. Then she said to the queen, O my mother, do thou honor him as deserveth he who saved my virtue. So the queen said to me, Welcome, O mortal. Indeed, thou hast done us a kindly deed which meriteth honor. Presently she ordered me a treasure suit worth a mint of money, and store of gems and precious stones, and said, Take him and carry him to the king. Accordingly they carried me into the king in his divan, where I found him seated on his throne with his marids and guards before him. And when I saw him, my sight was blent for that which was upon him of jewels. But when he saw me, he rose to his feet, and all his officers rose also to do him worship. Then he saluted me, and welcomed me, and entreated me with the utmost honor, and gave of that which was with him of good things. After which he said to some of his followers, Take him and carry him back to my daughter, that she may restore him to the place whence she brought him. So they carried me back to the lady Sadai, who took me up and flew away with me and my treasures. On this wise fared it with me and the princess, but as regards the captain of the galleon, he was aroused by the splash of my fall, when my brothers cast me into the sea, and said, What is that which hath fallen overboard? Whereupon my brothers fell to weeping and beating of breasts, and replied, Alas for our brother's loss! He thought to do his need over the ship's side, and fell into the water. Then they laid their hands on my good, but there befell dispute between them because of the damsel, each saying, None shall have her but I. And they abode jangling and wrangling each with the other, and remembered not their brother, nor his drowning, and their mourning for him ceased. As they were thus, behold, Sadai alighted with me in the midst of the galleon. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling of this tale, till it be morrow.